Howdy folks, welcome back to the patch 8.8 test server with the mighty Jingles. Today I'm going to be looking at some of the new kids on the block, the German tier 4 and 5 heavy tanks, the Durchbruchswagen 2 and the VK3001H. Yep, that's right, the 3001H is now a tier 5 heavy tank. Yeah. Well, anyway, we're going to start off by taking a very quick look at the Durchbruchswagen 2, which I think means breakthrough tank number 2. And the reason I'm saying it's going to be a very quick look is because I just can't get a game in this thing. I'm pretty sure it gets premium matchmaking, very preferential matchmaking, purely because it only gets 2 guns. It gets this god-awful 75mm L24, which only has 43mm of penetration. And it gets that thing, which you can see mounted on it, the 50mm L60, which has 67mm of penetration. Now, the French B1 Tier 4 heavy tank has preferential matchmaking because it only has 66mm of penetration on its 45mm gun. And this is 1mm of penetration more. It must also get premium matchmaking. And the evidence would appear to bear that out because I have been unable to get a game in this thing. If this thing could get matched up against tier 6s, I would have gotten games. But as it happens, the matchmaker sits there for 5 minutes, then it dumps me back in the garage and says, nope, couldn't find a game. So nobody's playing these things. I can't get into a match. So this is going to be the fastest review anybody has ever seen me do. As far as armour goes, yeah, it's not that bad for a tier 4, 50mm, but it's a tier 4 heavy tank. Nobody gets excited about them. It's a training tank for your heavy tank crew as you grind your way up to tier 5 and eventually tier 6, where the real fun begins with the 3601H. So that's pretty much it for the breakthrough tank number 2. Instead, we're going to take a look at the new, allegedly, tier 5 heavy tank, the VK3001H. Previously, tier 6 medium tank, the VK3001H, and there have been substantial changes to the good old 3001H. As a tier 5 heavy tank, this thing has KV1 performance without any of the armour. When that's going to come as a serious blow to morale for you 3001H drivers out there. I know there must be some of you out there. Because as the German medium tanks went, this thing, it might not have been incredibly effective, but it was fun to drive. It had a lot of character. This thing was so fast and manoeuvrable. Even though it had a mediocre selection of guns, as was true of most of the, well, all of the German tier 6 mediums, with the exception of the 3601H, which could at least mount the Konish. But this thing had character. It was fun to drive. It was small, it was fast, it was nippy. It was a fun tank. Well, not anymore. Or not for the same reasons. As I said, KV1, speed and manoeuvrability, or lack of it, with none of the armour. It's almost a 40-ton tank with a 400 horsepower engine. Oh dear. Top speed of 35 kph. The only time you're ever going to see that top speed is when you're going downhill. It will go over 40 going downhill, but you're never going to see 35 kph on the straight and level. Certainly not off-road. Not in this thing. It turns very slowly, especially if you're trying to go up even the slightest incline. 22 degrees traverse speed. This is just not the same tank. It's not even close to being the same tank it was. I can see a lot of 3001H users selling this thing in disgust when 8.8 goes live and this thing becomes a heavy tank. It's still got the same crappy armour that it had as a tier 6 medium, except now it's a tier 5 heavy. The KV has 50% more armour than this thing. The T1 has almost 100% more armour than this thing. Hell, the British Matilda tier 4 light tank has better armour than this thing. It has no armour at all whatsoever. The upgraded turret isn't that bad. I mean, the hull is 50mm all round, just as crap as it was as a tier 6 medium. The turret is 80 at the front, 60 at the sides and rear. But getting that marginal extra armour protection on the front of the turret comes at a massive price. The turret rotation, the traverse speed, drops down to 24 degrees per second. Let me just equip another gun so I can show you the stock turret, which had a 42-degree traverse. That was fantastic. But if you want to mount a decent gun to that great little turret, sorry, your choices are shit gun number 1, 2, or 3. I mean, even the 75mm L48 is crap, but you can't even fit that onto the stock turret. So it's top turret or nothing. And the reason I say that is because the only redeeming feature of this tank, and it is quite a good redeeming feature, is the fact that with that top turret you get these two guns. In fact, you could argue that it's just the one gun. This tank exists for no other reason than to very slowly and ponderously carry that conish gun around the battlefield. It also obviously has access to the 75mm L70, which is a great gun, but it's not as good as the conish, not on this tank. Let me just fit it so you can see what it looks like. So these two guns are the only reason this tank exists. This tank has a better selection of guns as a tier 5 heavy than any other tier 5 heavy in the game. Unquestionably, it's got better guns than the KV-1, better guns than the T1 heavy. No question about it. It's the best armed tier 5 heavy in the game. This tank gets guns that you get on tier 6 heavies and tier 5 tank destroyers. Hell, it gets guns that you get on tier 7 tank destroyers in the shape of that thing, the L70. While it doesn't have the rate of fire of the E25, it is the same gun. So that's the 3001H's new niche. It's a crap tank. It really is a crap tank. It's very, very bad. But it has the most amazing selection of guns in the L70 and the Konish. And as soon as you've unlocked the Konish, you're not going to be wanting to be using the L70. Because the differences between the two aren't great, but they're enough for you to scrap the L70 the second you unlock this thing. It has a better rate of fire, it has better penetration, it does the same damage, it's got better accuracy, it's got the same aiming time, and it weighs less. So the Konish, in effect, is the only reason you're going to want this tank. Unfortunately, the only time you're going to actually fit the Konish to this tank is if you plan on keeping the tank, because if you have a look at the research tree, there's the Konish and there's the L70. Neither of them are necessary to progress to the VK3001, also known as the Real Panther, or the 3601H, the Mini Tiger. These are both good tanks. To get to the 3601H, all you need is the derp gun, the 105mm howitzer. To get to the 3002M, all you need is this garbage 75mm L48. I would recommend, however, that you unlock both of these guns on the 3001H, purely and simply because you're going to want the L70 on the Panther. The real Panther here at tier 6, not that joke up there at tier 7. So, 3001H. It's not very good, but it does have two very, very, very good guns. When this thing is in a tier 5 game, and I'm speaking theoretically here because I have never managed to get this thing into a tier 5 game here on the test server, it is going to kick some major arse. Just don't get it shot at. Use your range and accuracy advantage with these guns. In a tier 6 game, it can still dish out some serious damage and do very, very well. In a tier 7 game, well, no tier 5 heavy does very well in the tier 7 game, but I would argue that this thing is probably the best of the tier 5 heavies to be driving around in a tier 7 game. Because yes, the T1 heavy might have better armour than this thing, substantially better armour than this thing. Yes, the KV-1 might also have better armour than this thing. But when there are 105mm T29 guns shooting back at you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you've got 80mm of armour or 50mm of armour. You're getting penetrated and you're going to die. And this thing does at least have a better selection of guns to fire back with. Now, there are not many, in fact I don't think there are any heavy tanks in the game that I would make this recommendation of. But I recommend you get camouflage as a crew skill on this thing. Because you're not going to be going anywhere fast in this thing. And the armour is so incredibly bad that everything that you get matched up against is going to be able to penetrate you. in order to survive and be effective in this tank, you just don't want to be getting shot at, despite the fact that it's allegedly a heavy. And so I definitely think that down here at tier 5, camouflage is not a bad idea on this thing. And it's not a very large target in the first place, so it probably has, well, one of the better heavy tank camo ratings. And so you want to be putting this thing in the sort of situation where you're shooting at them without them being able to shoot back at you. And for that, you're going to need view range and you're going to need camo skills. So, there you go, the 3001H. Let's see how it plays. Well, the gun depression is actually pretty good. Unfortunately, the matchmaking on the test server is pretty diabolical. And again, this is true of most tier 5 heavy tanks. You cannot carry a bad game in a tier 5 heavy tank in a tier 7 match. It's just not possible. And this was a pretty bad game. And most of the games on the test server had matchmaking just like this. So I did nail a tier 7 tank destroyer there. You know, that's nice. Oh, I'm getting shot at by a Black Prince. But look at this. I'm the only tier 5 tank in the game that isn't a scout. And it's like this over and over and over and over and over on the test server. And yep, that's 2 E25s making a beeline over this ridge. There's myself and a TOG waiting to stop them. You are so screwed. And unfortunately, a lot of the games were like this. In fact, I'd say all bar 2 of the games were like this. Yeah, you've got the same gun as those E25s, but they fire about 4 times as fast as you do. To be fair, we didn't stand a chance against these two. They knew exactly what they were doing. One of them parks right on the TOG's arse, where the TOG can't get his gun down far enough to shoot him. The other one takes me out, and then they finish the TOG off. So, yeah, tier 7 games in this thing. They're brutal. So, what can you actually do to make yourself useful for your team if you're in the unfortunate position of being in a tier 5 heavy tank in a tier 7 match? And I mean, this game was nothing special on the test server. Once again, I'm the only tier 5 tank on the team that isn't a scout. And you get this over and over and over and over. And it can be really frustrating and depressing and leave you with a negative perception of the machine. But, you know, it's not the tank's fault. It's just test server matchmaking. Well, at the very least, yeah, it's a tier 5 heavy tank in a tier 7 match, but it's a tier 5 heavy tank with the best guns available to a tier 5 heavy tank in a tier 7 match. So, while it's certainly true that to a large degree you're pretty much at the mercy of the rest of your team's competence, you're certainly not powerless. What you have to do is basically keep your gun in play. Don't take unnecessary chances. You've got to play cautiously. You have to keep yourself alive. And I know it sounds obvious, and I know people are going to say, oh, the Jingles, T29s just rip me apart. Well, don't go around corners against T29s then. You know they're going to rip you apart. Don't let them shoot at you. Play defensively. Support your team where you can. I mean, and I say where you can because here we go. Finally got into a firing position on that Panther, and I'm taking hits from an E25, and I managed to do one penetrating hit on them, but it's something. It's helping the team. You've got to play to your strengths and weaknesses. Oh, play to your strengths and avoid allowing the enemy to exploit your weaknesses. And if that means camping at the back and taking the shots where you can, then that's what you do. While at the same time being mindful of the situation on the battlefield and when is the best time to move forward. Right now, while I'm being bodged out of the way by that SU-122-244, Probably not the best moment to move forward. I really didn't want to get caught in the open by all those guys on the corner. But if we don't move forward now, that E25 is going to die. And I don't have a lot of health, and I will be penetrated and damaged by everything that shoots at me. But right now we need more hit points on that corner. We can't let that E25 and SU-100, or SU-122 even, take all the hits. And I may have just made it here in time. We've lost the E25. But now, yeah, now you're not feeling so confident. I made it there just in time to keep the SU-122-44's gun in play. Bearing in mind that E25 is going to reload a hell of a lot faster than me, I need to pull back and not let him get 2 shots into me for every shot I get into him. There we go. There's another kill. That's another enemy tank removed from the game. That's what it's all about. Okay, we've lost the SU-122-44 and there's still a Tier 6 Panther over there. So I still have enough health. Okay, he's fired. Let's not... There we go. Don't let him just pull back with impunity. If he's fired and hit you, fine. Get out there and take your shot while he's reloading. And now we need to be careful. Oh, and I actually bounced a shot and finished him. It's 3 enemy tanks killed. I haven't actually done a lot of damage. And yeah, all I've been doing is cleaning up the damage that other people have done. But that's about all you can do in a Tier 5 heavy tank in a Tier 7 match. And I don't think I've ever seen anybody quite so happy to get killed in a game of World of Tanks. If you can check out chat over there, the Panther driver was delighted that I managed to kill him. So now I'm in a weak position. I don't have a lot of health left. I know there's another E25 around there somewhere, so I don't want to just drive around the corner in front of him. He's going to be waiting for me to go. That T29, it was on the wrong side of the mountain, otherwise I could potentially have killed him. So maybe now would be a good time to go back around that corner. Because if there's an E25 sitting there waiting for me, he's probably gotten bored by now. You know, if I was going to push around that corner, surely I would have done it by now. That's the theory, anyway. I mean, I'm all the way around here anyway. I'm not one of the fastest tanks in the game. If I could get in there and kill their artillery, that would be a major benefit to the team. I've already taken 3 enemy guns out of play. I think I've earned my money in this game. And with any luck, that E25 has moved elsewhere. Ah, crap. No, he hasn't. And I had no idea where he was. He didn't even reveal himself until he fired his second shot, and the second shot was the one that killed me, so... Oh well, you know, I did what I could. I don't think you can ask more of a Tier 5 in this kind of matchmaking than what I did. And I was pretty much convinced that, there we go, we've just lost our last medium. Now we're down to 2 artillery. And I was convinced that this was going to be another miserable defeat in the 3001H. You're not going to believe this. So they got 2 E25s. Okay. That was a real clutch shot from the S51. That guy never knew what hit him. Now, here's our Crusader Sp. This fella. Just watch this. Remember, the Crusader Sp is a Crusader chassis with a gun mounted backwards. So this thing moves faster backwards than it does forwards. Now I can only assume that was a bit of server lag there, because it looked like he was shooting at nothing, but he obviously saw that E25. The E25 misses him, so that's nice. Watch this. Ah, you forgot that this thing can do 40 kph backwards. Oh dear. And move and dodge artillery fire. Awesome. But it gets better. It's not looking quite so desperate now, is it? I'm going to speed things up here. All we have left is, well, I say all, they still have an E25 Tier 7 tank destroyer and a very capable artillery piece. The S51 is a one-shot kill. Well, they're both one-shot kills if artillery hits them. But this Crusader Sp driver, I'm just in awe. He already has 4 kills, so he's earned his money. Get a load of this. Oh, he's spotted enemy artillery. Or somebody. I'm not sure if it was him or the S51. It was probably him. He misses his first shot. Repositions. S51's driving up there with balls of steel. Still have no idea where that E25 is. He nails him with his second shot. This is where it starts getting funny. So he turns it around again. And there he is. He's AFK. Watch this. S51. I don't know if the S51 was deliberately trolling him and deliberately sitting right in his line of fire saying, my shot. But he lobs one over the S51 anyway. The S51's going for the RAM. I don't think that was on purpose. I think he was actually trying to lob one past that S51. I'm convinced that S51 was deliberately blocking him to try and claim the kill. And I think he accidentally, accidentally, recklessly, whatever. I'm pretty sure he was aiming at the E25 and hit the S51, put himself in harm's way. And now look at this. He's just sitting there. He's going to get 100% invader and then kill the E25. That's exactly what I would have done. Well played. This was a great game to watch. I'm really, really glad I didn't quit out of this after I died. And justice. That's one of the most well-owned Top Guns I think I've ever seen. Well, that was an interesting game. It's probably a mild way of putting it. And I don't think I could have done a lot better in this tank in that match. I mean, I keep getting thrown into Tier 7 game after Tier 7 game after Tier 7 game. But it's difficult to complain too. Well, it's not difficult to complain too much. It's very easy to complain too much. But if you gave me a choice of which Tier 5 heavy tank I would want to be in a Tier 7 game, I'd have to say this thing. Because it doesn't matter that the T1 heavy has 83mm of frontal armour. If E25s, SU-122-44s, T29s, T25 ATs, AMX 46s are shooting back at you, your 83mm of armour is meaningless anyway. So the fact that this thing only has 50mm of armour just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's in a Tier 5, 6 or 7 game. You're going to get penetrated by everybody shooting at you. Your armour is not a concern in this tank. What you're firing back with is, and this thing has the best weapons of any of the Tier 5 heavies. So this is probably the best Tier 5 heavy tank in the game to be in a Tier 6 or Tier 7 game. And we were able to get 3 kills. And I don't think I'm exaggerating too much to say that if I hadn't been there in my shitty little Tier 5 heavy tank, we would have lost that game. Because, yeah, I didn't do a lot of damage. Only did 514 damage. but I nailed 3 enemy tanks and prevented them from outflanking and overrunning our artillery, and our artillery went on to win the game. So there's that. Also, it was an epic game. I was sure it was just going to be another one of those shitty tier 7 games this thing kept getting into over and over on the test server, and was never going to end up surviving my replay folder intact, but what a finish. Anyway, let's continue the quest to get a match that isn't dominated by tier 7 tanks. Oh, there it is. And yeah, this is the best the test server can do for you at tier 5. I never did get this thing into a tier 5 game, but a tier 6 match was the best I could do. So, let's see what we can manage. Now, KV2, mortal enemy of VK3001H. I have 50mm of armour. The KV2's derp gun has 83mm of penetration with its high explosive shell and does 910 average damage. Look at how much health I have and you do the maths. Stay the hell away from anything that has a derp gun if you're driving one of these tanks, because they will just om nom 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 eat you right up. So we've got a scout. That ELC driver has very bravely made it all the way up to heavy tank corner. I'm not seeing anything. Which is, you know, the KV2s are not the fastest machines in the game, but it looks like they're trying to rush the middle. These KV2 drivers are getting cocky. Alright. Let's see what your... I'll see your 152mm derp gun, and I'll raise you a German 75mm L70. That's what I'm talking about. Chew on that one, Ivan. Right, that's one mortal enemy of 3001H removed from the battlefield. And I'm confident I'm not going to run into any more of them up here. But you do not ever want to be putting this thing in close range combat with a KV2 or anything that fires a howitzer. They'll just rip you apart. This thing is not the 3001H that it used to be. You used to drive this thing around KV2s, just laughing at them and pumping shots into their sides and rear. You can't do that anymore. This thing doesn't have the mobility. What it does have is a pair of reasonably accurate, high DPM, high rate of fire guns. And if you can keep the enemy at arm's length, you'll kick their arse. Just, you know, make sure you bring a book along for when you're driving this thing up any hills. 40 tons, 400 horsepower engine. Yeah, it's not good. But now I'm on the high ground. And I've got I've got one of the best guns in this match, if not the best gun in this match, for long range shooting. And there's one of the other KV2s. And while this certainly isn't the E25's 75mm gun, you know, it doesn't have the rate of fire. But just having this gun at tier 5 is a blessing. And the rate of fire isn't that bad. So if at first you miss, just keep shooting. Oh, second KV2. Okay, the first one's coming out, so we're going to nail him. He's disappeared. Oh, our artillery's killed him. Right, fine. Concentrate on this fella. Got to try to keep that A43 alive because he's my eyes and ears at the moment. Our other 3001H is moving around to try and get some more flanking shots in on this fella. We've got this. We've totally got this. A43's done well. You see, that is the sort of thing that the 3001H used to do. Not anymore. Now, you're a smiling assassin. And there is the other German. New heavy tank. That's new. The 361H. tier 6 heavy. And all you got to do, I don't know, it's easier said than done, is keep them at arm's length. The strengths of this tank are not in close range knife fighting. It's doing stuff like this. And there goes another victim. So all we have left now is an A43 and their artillery. And this is the fastest you're ever going to see a 3001H moving, going down the hillside on El Haluf. Or, you know, hurtling to his doom from the bridge on Mountain Pass. I'd dearly love to know where that other A43 is. Artillery's just successfully defended himself. You know, credit where credit's due. But I haven't taken a scratch yet, so I have some, you know, I've still got this health pool to play around with if I run into that A43. There he is. Well, I will angle what armour I have, but I'm not counting on it. Oh, I did actually bounce a shot. Well, that was unexpected. And I bounced another one. And our other 3001H finishes it off. And now it's just artillery. And oh, that was a spot of luck. High explosive shells are the bane of this thing's existence. But he missed. I didn't. He's dead. We win. Which is nice. Finally, I managed to get into a game with the 3001H on the test server that wasn't just dominated by tier 7s and was finally able to show you what this thing can actually do. It's not a bad tank. I mean, it's not the 3001H that it used to be. Just forget that thing ever existed. This is very much a heavy tank. And I was convinced that this was not going to end well when I saw all those KV2s on the enemy team. I mean, the KV2's 152mm gun has 83mm of penetration and does 910 average damage with its high explosive shell. Not its premium ammo, its high explosive shell. Yeah. I thought I get hit. If this tank gets hit once by a KV2, it is dead. That 50mm of armour is just going to be like paper, even to the KV2's high explosive shell. And it'll just wipe you out. 660 hit points. 910 average damage, you do the maths. So I was determined to not give these KV2s shots at me, and not get close to them, and use the long range advantage that this thing has, and that's what you have to do. And there you go, first class mastery badge. 2,300 damage done. Hell's bells, I almost did as much damage as the rest of the team combined. And, you know, the XP that you deserve for that kind of result. How did we do? 25 shots fired, 24 hits, 20 penetrations. Good gun. And I wasn't even using the Konish. I haven't used the Konish on this tank yet. I've been trying to see what the L70 was like. The Konish is going to be even better. Took 5 hits, only 3 of which penetrated. 2 bounces, which is nice, but none of the KV2s got a shot at me. I made sure of that. Although there's no way I am taking any hits from those KV2s, or it's just going to be good night Vienna. So there it is, the 3001H. It's not a bad little heavy tank. It is certainly nothing like the tier 6 medium tank version that this tank used to be, but it's not a bad heavy tank either. I mean, it's a bad tank, but it's got some fantastic guns. And I may even end up keeping this thing and playing it in lower tier 5, you know, tier 5 and 6 games, just for the lols. I think you can have a lot of fun with this thing and that Konish gun. So there you go, folks. The 3001H tier 6 medium, force of habit. The 3001H tier 5 heavy German tank. Not as bad as you may have been led to believe. I've certainly had some fun driving it on those rare occasions when I was actually able to put the gun to use. But those are test server rules, and obviously there's very, very harsh. You know, the lower down the tiers you are, the more harsh the matchmaking is, because there's so many more people trying out the higher tier tanks that you're constantly getting stuffed in as cannon fodder into higher tier games. But it hasn't all been frustrating. As always, folks, take care on that battlefield. I'll catch you next time.